بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. إخوة الكرام وأخوات السيدات, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. MashaAllah, brothers and sisters, good to see you all today, and I'm also even happier to see a lot of the youth attending the dars. This is very important, they are our future. So the more that you can bring them to the dars, the better, our community will be in the future. So we carry on with the sharh of the explanation of Al-Arba'in Nawawi, the 40 or so hadith compiled by Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. And today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we're going to start with the fourth hadith of the series. And this hadith, without any further ado, is an al-Mu'minin, Abdullah, عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو رد. رواه البخاري ومسلم. وفي رواية المسلم من عمل عملا ليس عليه أمرنا فهو رد. On the authority of the mother of the faithful or the mother of the believers, Aisha radiallahu anha, who said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, he who innovates something in this matter of ours, yani Islam, that is not of it, will have it rejected by Allah. Bukhari and Muslim narrated this. In another version, in Muslim it reads, he who doesn't act, which does not have, or which was not according to how we commanded, will have it rejected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aisha radiallahu anha was given a noble nickname, al-Mu'minin. Al-Mu'minin, the mother of the believers, because she was one of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And all the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam were given the names of the mother of the faithful, or the mother of the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَزْوَاجُهُ أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ. And his wives are their mothers, referring to the mothers of the believers. Aisha also has another nickname, which is Abdullah, the mother of Abdullah, which poses an interesting question, brothers and sisters. Did she actually have a child or not?
No.
Some of the scholars mention the fact that she had a child, but that it was stillborn, whilst others are of the opinion that she never had a child, and stillborn or not. So she never had a child at all. They say that she gave herself this nickname because the most beloved names to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are Abdullah and Abdul Rahman. As we all know, Aisha radiallahu anha was one of the greatest scholars this religion has ever produced. Indeed, many of the Sahaba used to reference her for many of the Islamic rulings. The second narration of this hadith, reported by Imam Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ says, he who doesn't act which we have not commanded will have it rejected by Allah, has a wider scope than the first narration, for it includes all actions, be it worship or not worship. What is important is that if it is not commanded by Allah and His Messenger, then it won't be accepted by Allah. This hadith is one of the major principles in Islam, and it's indicated in a verse where Allah says, وَهَذَا صِرَاطِي مستقيما فاتبعوه ولا تتبعوا سبلا فتفرق بكم عن سبيلي. And moreover, this is my path, which is straight, so follow it and do not follow other ways, for you will be separated from His way. The scholars are in agreement, brothers and sisters, and all of you should know this by now, that for every action to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has to fulfill two conditions, which are yes, but in a more purity of intention and being done according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or the Prophet said in other ways, قال Allah or قال Rasul. But here what we're trying to do is bring a point before Allah, قال Rasul, is the fact that ikhlas is important for any action to be, to be accepted. Now, so what can we benefit from this hadith, brothers and sisters? Obviously, the number one point is that it is haram to innovate anything in our religion, even if it's out of pure intention, or even if the heart seems to accept it, for this is from the shaitan's trickery. What about if someone says, though, if I ask you the question, if I innovate something that has the roots in the religion, but I do it in a particular way that was not done in the religion, would it be rejected or not? The answer to that is yes, it will be rejected. An example of some acts of worship, remembrance, mannerisms, etc. that people may have innovated, they're all rejected unless they are done in accordance to the way the Prophet and unless they're done with a purity of intention. But we're going to go a lot deeper into this hadith, brothers and sisters. We should mention here that the following the way of the Prophet ﷺ only holds true if 6 conditions are met. So we know that any action to be accepted, the first condition that needs to be met, it needs to be done truly for the sake of Allah alone. The second condition, it needs to be done according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. To go into more detail about what does this mean, following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the scholars have come up with 6 tests that need to be met in order for you to be able to fulfill this condition. Otherwise, it will be rejected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Firstly, the action should be in agreement with the sunnah as far as its action. So the 6 reasons, before I go into them in detail, the first one is the reason it's done, its type, its quantity, its order, its timing, and its place. So, its reason, its type, its quantity, its order, its timing, and its place. Let's go through each one of these in a bit more detail. Firstly, the action should be done in agreement with the sunnah as for its reason. So if someone performed an act of worship based on a reason that Allah Himself did not consider to be a reason, like someone who prays 2 rak'ah every time they enter the house. We know 2 rak'ah prescribed when you enter the masjid. So this individual prays 2 rak'ah every time he enters his house. He's believed that the reason for praying this 2 rak'ah is because he has entered his house. But because the reason for doing so was not prescribed by Allah, the act of worship is therefore rejected as a consequence. Yet another example will be of someone that decided to celebrate yearly the day the Muslims won the Battle of Badr. And we know the Battle of Badr was the major battle in Islam, right? But he decides to celebrate this battle yearly. This is the reason. But it will be rejected because he used a reason Allah Himself did not consider to be a valid reason for celebration. So this was the first point, which was the reason. The second point is that the action should be in agreement with the sunnah in its type. If someone wants to worship Allah with a type of worship not considered valid in religion, it will be rejected also. Like the person who sacrificed a horse for the sake of Allah. The type, right? He just sacrificed another animal, but he decided to sacrifice a horse for the sake of Allah. It would not be accepted from them. Because we all know that a horse is not one of the 3 types of sacrificial animals that we offer in Islam, which are the camel, the cow, and the sheep. Very good. But say he was to sacrifice it in order to give its meat for charity, now that's permissible. Because he didn't use this type as what? To give in terms of one of the meats that we give, for example, during, when we do fidya, whenever we do an offering for Allah, we don't sacrifice a horse. But here, he's not sacrificing it for that reason. He's giving it as meat to charity. Like, for example, you could say, I want to slaughter 10 chickens and give them to charity. But the reason here is not as a sacrificial animal, but it is as sadaqah. In this case, it will be accepted. Thirdly, the action should be in agreement with the sunnah in its quantity. For example, if someone was to perform an act of worship more or less times than that which was prescribed by Allah, and then it will not be acceptable, obviously. An example of that is someone who performed wudu. And every time they wash their parts, they wash it 4 times. So we're talking about how many times? We're talking about quantity now. So they wash it 4 times. Instead of the prescribed what? 3 times. In this case, the 4th wash would not be accepted from them. Moreover, the Prophet ﷺ also said about this, مَنْ زَادَ عَلَى ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ أَسَى وَتَعَدَّى وَظَلَمَ. So there are things reinforcing the fact that you shouldn't be doing more than what the Prophet ﷺ did in the first place, which here I'll translate. And whoever does more than this, is indeed sinful, has transgressed the boundaries, and has performed an act of oppression. So here we're talking in terms of quantity. Okay. Fourthly, that the action should be in agreement with the sunnah in its order. Okay? If someone wants to perform an act of worship in the incorrect order, it will not be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An example of that will be of someone that when praying decides to do sujood before they do ruku'. So it's changed the order. Is it accepted? It is not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that prayer. Likewise, someone wants to perform wudu by starting with their feet, then their hands, then their heads, then their hands, then their face. He's changed the order. He's trying to do wudu, but he's changed the order, therefore it's not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fifthly, the fifth reason, or the fifth point that we need to fulfill in order for something to be considered as being done according to the sunnah, is that the action should be in agreement with the sunnah with regards to its timing. So you can't innovate also with regards to the timing. So if one wants to perform one of the 5 obligatory prayers before its time, would that prayer be accepted? No. It will not be accepted. Very good. Another example will be if someone was to perform the Eid sacrifice. Now, when do we do the Eid sacrifice? Is it before the prayer or after the prayer? It's after the prayer. That's the sunnah. So if I decide to sacrifice my animal before the Eid prayer, I've changed here what? What have I changed? The timing. Therefore, it is now not consistent to the sunnah and it is not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, another example will be of someone who performs i'tikaf. I'tikaf. When do we perform i'tikaf? In Ramadan. Very good. Last 10 days is something else. But i'tikaf is allowed? Jameel. I'll ask you the question. If I want to do i'tikaf in Shawwal, I want to do i'tikaf in another month, am I allowed to do it? The Prophet did i'tikaf throughout almost every Ramadan that he lived, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But in this particular case, who did he allow to do i'tikaf outside Ramadan? Because he swore an oath to do i'tikaf. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So there are times when if that order was allowed by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then it is according to the sunnah, obviously. So here, there is no question of timing. Because it came from Rasulullah. And if Rasulullah said it, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inspired him, to say this to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala. If one was to delay an act of worship from its appointed time. So before we said bringing the Eid sacrifice before the time of prayer. So what about if I would decide to do my salah after the time? But here we're talking about someone that says, I want to pray Fajr after the time. I want to pray Dhuhr after its time. It is not accepted because it's not according to the Sunnah, according to its time. Very good. I said there were 6 points. The sixth one is what? It needs to be done in accordance to the Sunnah with regards to its place. Very good. So if someone wants to perform i'tikaf in a place other than the mosque, you ask him, okay, what are you doing in your house? He says, I'm doing i'tikaf. You're doing i'tikaf in your house? Yeah, I'm doing i'tikaf in my bedroom. No, I'm doing i'tikaf in my living room. And you catch him there watching Netflix and he's saying he's doing i'tikaf. So he has changed the ibadah here because the i'tikaf, its place is the mosque. Now he's changed the place to his living room. So therefore we say this ibadah is not accepted because you changed its place. Very good, brothers and sisters. So this is important. So it's very easy for us to say any type of worship needs to have 2 conditions. The first needs to be done, the first one needs to have ikhlas, needs to be done with purity of intention, and the second needs to be done with the sunnah, according to the sunnah. But the sunnah has more details. So these are the 6 points that, the 6 tests that we put in any type of ibadah, any type of worship before we say it was done correctly in accordance to the sunnah. And I know Sheikh Ibrahim had a comment there, but we'll come to the comments inshallah after the lesson. Now let's point out some examples that people unfortunately fall into, actions that they fall into, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not accept them. For example, whoever buys and sells after the second adhan of which day? Friday. Jummah, or Friday prayer. Is this transaction allowed or not?
Not allowed.
It is not allowed. طيب. He's doing it in Jum'ah. What is obligatory? And I must point out, just a little side note here, for those who Jum'ah is obligatory upon. Because Jum'ah is not obligatory for everybody. Right? So, we know Jum'ah umuman, in general terms, is obligatory upon who? Upon men that are resident. Right? There are some istithna, there are some things that we can take away. Someone that's sick or whatever. There are some, other people that are not, even though they're men, and they don't even know they're from the Medina, the place where they live in. They might not have to come to me if they're sick or whatever, or something else. But here we'll talk about in general terms. But women, are they obligated to come to Jum'ah? So therefore, if a woman was to do a transaction after the second adhan of Yawm al-Jum'ah, it is different from a man doing the same thing. This is important. Okay, so this would not be accepted, we'll agree that. If the transaction was indeed to take place, it would then be made void by returning the money to the buyer and returning the product to the seller. It's as simple as that. An example of this is when the Prophet ﷺ was informed that a portion of good dates were being bought in return for 2 portions of inferior dates. What is this called in Islam? I give you 2 good dates. You give me back 2 bad dates. So we're trading. This is a trade. This is a business transaction. Don't look at it as questions and we're just playing. I'm trying to get 2 good dates out of you by giving you 2 bad dates. What is this called? If you don't know this, then you're going to know it today. This is what? This is riba. This is riba. Okay, riba is interest. This is what we call interest. The interest comes in many shapes and forms. Interest also comes in what? When you're selling gold with gold, silver with silver. As I'm going to go in there in a second, if I give you, an ounce of gold or gram of gold, right? And you give me of good gold, superior quality gold, and you give me, a gram of inferior quality gold. As a trade, this is called a riba also. Okay? A lot of people, unfortunately, in the year we're in, they think of riba just as interest, as the numbers 3%, 4%. It doesn't quite work like that. Okay? But let's not jump the gun here. So the Prophet ﷺ spoke about, 2 people who gave 2 good dates and in return got 2 bad dates. This transaction was cancelled because obviously it is one of the facets, it is one of the way that riba portrays itself. Another one, if a woman was to marry without a wali, what is a wali?
Father.
No, what is a wali? Is a guardian. A wali can be her father, but the wali doesn't have to be a father. Okay? So, a father, for example, might have passed away, and a wali could be her brother, for example. A woman marries without her wali being present, then the marriage would be what? Will be null and will be void and will be invalid. Because the Prophet said, لا نكاح إلا بولي. There is no marriage except with a guardian. Another point, if a man were to divorce his wife when she was on her menses, she's on her period.
After.
Fine. No, I'm saying he divorces her when she's on her period. Okay? Is that divorce valid or not?
Invalid.
Invalid. Contradict an ayah. Invalid.
It's invalid. Ooh, that's a big fatwa you just gave there. Anyone else say it's valid? No one says it's valid. So you're assuming it's invalid. Let me go into detail. Let's first try to understand how divorce works in Islam. A lot of people sometimes get confused at-talaq marratan, and they think, it's just twice. Divorce in Islam is when a man can divorce his wife by saying, I divorce you. Right? In English, right? I divorce you. If he says that once, the woman then enters what? A period of how many months?
3 periods. 3 months.
Of 3 months or 3 cycles of her period. So if a man goes to a woman and says to her, I divorce you, anti taliqa, you are divorced, or whatever language you're in, it doesn't matter the language you're in. Don't tell me if you speak Albanian, you said to your wife, I divorce you, then you come sheikh, it's not valid because it was in Arabic. No. Any language that she understands is divorce. So you said you divorced her. Now she has entered what? A time of 3 months, which is called the waiting period. Of 3 months or 3 menstrual cycles. This is the first time you divorce her. طيب. After this, can you take her back?
Yes.
Yes.
You said no.
The period of 3 months, you can call it.
During the period of the 3 months, you can take her back.
Yes.
Very good. So imagine, you divorce her, and I'm not encouraging you in any way to go and divorce your wife. Don't leave this dance, go back and divorce your wife. Say, Muhammad taught us, I'm just trying it out. There's no playing around with divorce. And I'll tell you why I mentioned it's not as a joke, because it is exactly because people played with divorce that Umar ibn Khattab changed the rules around it. And I'll come to that. So he has divorced his wife. She entered her iddah, she entered her waiting period, but he took her back before that waiting period. So he divorced her how many times?
One.
He divorced her back once and they got back together. Fine. If at a later date he was to divorce her a second time, again, she will enter her waiting period, and within that time they could get back together without remarrying. Jameel. If they got back together, then he needs to bear in mind he has divorced her how many times? Twice already.
Yeah.
Okay, so he has now divorced her 3 times. She's finished her waiting period, and he can't take her back until she gets married.
Someone else.
She gets married to someone else, yes, and I won't go into details because there's children here, and they get involved. I think that's quite clear what that means. After they have to get involved.
Yeah.
It is not enough, because otherwise it'll be easy. You divorce your wife and you tell your brother, marry my wife, and then divorce her the next day so I can marry her again. No, you can't do this, right? So, now he needs to engage with her, in those private details that we know of, and then he must divorce her, and then you can what? And then you can marry her again. Now the scholars are in agreement that to divorce one's wife during her menses is what? Is an act of bid'ah. There is no difference of opinion, brothers and sisters. Doing talaq of your wife when she is on her menses, you have committed bid'ah. Forget whether or not the divorce takes place or not. This is a separate issue what we're going to go into. But to divorce her woman in her menses is an act of bid'ah according to the consensus of the scholars. But so if a woman is on her period, your wife for example, and you go and divorce her while she's on, you say I divorce you when she's on her period, you've committed an act of bid'ah. The question now remains though, is this divorce counted or not? The scholars have differed.
Mostly it's counted.
The scholars have differed. But Sheikh Ibrahim says, most scholars say it is counted. Let's go into that. When Imam Ahmad was asked, or was made aware of the view that divorce during a woman's menses was invalid, he said, that is an evil opinion. When they told Imam Ahmad that divorce during a woman's period basically was invalid, it didn't count, what did he say? Say, this is an evil opinion. Now, that is the saying of Imam Ahmad. And we all know who Imam Ahmad was, a scholar of Hadith and a scholar of fiqh. Many of the scholars also view that if someone divorced his wife once during her menses, this would count as one of the 3 times he could divorce her. On the other hand, there are also great scholars that believe that divorce during a woman's menses is not counted. From amongst them is who? Al-Allama, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. He is of the view that if you divorce your wife during her menses, it is what? It is not counted. So as you can see, there's a difference of opinion, brothers and sisters, but I have mentioned it here because I don't want you to be quick to give a fatwa that divorcing a woman's menses is not counted. Right? But in fact, you should make it count because, Sheikh Ibrahim rightly said so, because that is this brother brought upon himself. He went and decided he knows it's bid'ah. Or even if he doesn't know it's bid'ah, he should have known it's bid'ah. Because divorce is not a small thing. Right? And when he does divorce her on her period, we should make it count. Because he has brought this upon himself, and let it be alone that he has committed an act of bid'ah, and the bid'ah has its own punishment Yawm al-Qiyamah. So, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and I've mentioned and alluded to this point. For example, when people came up with new innovative ways of divorcing their wives, how did they start innovating in the time of Umar ibn Khattab when it came to divorce? What did they used to say? Any of you know?
They would say the talaq 3 times at one time.
Very good, mashallah, barakallahu fiqh. They will say you are divorced 3 times. Because in Islam, what do we say? You are divorced. Then you go through it and you say you are divorced again. And then you say you are divorced. But if you're saying to her, you are divorced 3 times, the people started to say this a lot at the time of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. Now, even though this type of divorce, during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whenever you say, أنت طالقة ثلاثة, or you say to her, you are divorced 3 times. At the time of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and 2 years into the leadership of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, only counted as 1. So in the beginning of Islam, when you told your wife, you are divorced 3 times, it only counted as once. Throughout the time of the Prophet ﷺ, throughout the Khalifate of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, and for the first 2 years of the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh. But people started to play around with divorce. Every time they divorced their wife, instead of divorcing them once, أنت طالقة ثلاث. Allah, they would say to her, you are divorced 3 times. So because he started to play with religion, what did Umar do? What did he do? He made it count as 3 times. So as soon as you told your wife, you are divorced 3 times, it's over for you and her. She can now go ahead after that, she can go ahead marry someone else. This is what the Umar implemented because people started to play with the religion. I say this to you, brothers and sisters, because nowadays people play around with divorce. To the point that someone who is not even a student of knowledge or, let alone, a scholar, could come up to you and say, for example, this is the kind of weird things that, that people, bring to the students of knowledge. They come and say, look, I divorced my wife when she was on her period 10 years ago. I remember I divorced her 10 years ago and she was on her period. And then, so you said to her that she's no longer your wife. And he goes to you, but I only done it during her menses, and I consider that to be an act of innovation. So you see, he's given fatwa himself. I consider it to be an act of innovation, so therefore, it's invalid. Are you following what I'm saying? This brother comes to you. He's divorced his wife 10 years ago. He wants to now say that this woman is still his wife. So he comes with the argument saying, I divorced her during her period. And this is bid'ah. It's an act of innovation, it doesn't count. So therefore, she's still my wife. You see the kind of lengths people go to it to play with religion? So what you do, you make it count. You give them the fatwa that even though you divorced her in her, in her menses 10 years ago, then this is an act of bid'ah. I ask you now, what about if this woman married someone else? Are you then going to go to this, woman and say, no, she's not your wife, she's my wife? You can't do this. So whenever people start to pray with religion, you enforce upon them what they have enforced upon themselves. In summary, brothers and sisters, the majority of scholars are of the opinion that divorce during a woman's menses is counted. Another example of the things that we don't do that are not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I alluded to this earlier, if someone wants to sell an ounce of gold in return for 1.5 ounces of gold, this transaction is what? Is invalid, because the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تبيع الذهب بالذهب إلا مثلا بمثل سواء بسواء. Do not sell gold for gold unless they are of what? Of the same quality. Someone who decides to offer voluntary prayer during one of the times voluntary prayer is not allowed. This prayer would also not be accepted from them. In Imam Muslim's version of the Hadith, the Prophet says, he who does an act which we have not commanded will have it rejected by Allah. This applies clearly to all acts of worship, because the general principle with acts of worship is that what? What is the qaida that we apply, the principle that we apply when it comes to acts of worship, is that our act of worship is not permissible until dalla alayhi dalil. Until what? There is clear evidence permitting it. You with me? So if you see a brother doing an act of worship, you see someone, for example, praying, 5 rak'ah. In the middle of the day, he prays 5 rak'ah. You ask him, brother, what is this? And he says to you, I'm doing, 5 rak'ah. And the person that did the 5 rak'ah asks you, and what is your proof that I can't do this? You say to him, you're wrong. It is not me that needs to give you proof. It is you that needs to give me proof. Because the qa'idah, the principle that we follow is that every act of worship is haram until it is proved that it is halal. So it is upon the person that's doing the act of worship to substantiate his argument and come up with dalil, not the person who is questioning him. You with me? This is when it comes to acts of worship. This is completely the contrary to acts that are not acts of worship. For example, you see someone going hunting, and he's hunting for birds. He's hunting birds, and then you catch him and you say to him, brother, why are you hunting for birds? What is the proof that you have that hunting birds is halal? What do you say to him? He's hunting birds. Is this an act of worship? It's not an act of worship. So you can say to him, brother, you're asking me what is the proof that I have to do this. But the truth is that the asl, the principle is that for any non-act of worship, it is permissible until proved otherwise. So exactly the contrary to act of worship. Someone, for example, is driving a car and you're asking, astaghfirullah, brother, give me dalil, give me proof that driving a car is halal. So I don't have to prove that to you. The proof is that the principle is that it is allowed until you prove to me that it is not allowed. Right? So the burden of proof when it comes to the act of worship is upon the person that's performing that act. The burden of proof for someone that's doing an act that is not considered an act of worship, it is upon the person that's questioning that act. Is that clear?
Yep.
So to summarize, and we conclude with this. Acts of worship are into 3 categories. Those we know that Allah has prescribed as acts of worship, they are allowed. Those we know that Allah has prohibited as acts of worship, those are not allowed. Those we don't know whether or not they are acts of worship or not. For example, I'm not quite sure if I can pray, someone that's come new into Islam, I don't know if I should pray, Dhuhr 5 rak'ah or 2 or whatever, but he does it anyway. This is not allowed. Okay? So when you don't know if an act of worship is allowed or not, the principle is that it is not allowed. So you must first do your research, see if it is allowed, then you do that act of worship. For non-act of worship, what we call al-mu'amalat in terms of fiqh, can be summarized into 3 categories. Those non-acts of worship we know that Allah has permitted, they are what? They are allowed. For example, the Prophet ﷺ ate the meat of what? Of a wild donkey. This is, min al-mu'amalat. He ate it, and this is allowed because, so if I also eat a donkey now, I'm not advising you to go and eat a donkey, but if you do eat a donkey, then it is allowed because the Prophet ﷺ did it, so we know it is allowed. Those non-acts of worship, again, we know that Allah has prohibited, they are not allowed, obviously. Like eating the meat of carnivores that have what? They have sharp teeth and? Okay. The third one are those acts of worship, non-acts of worship, we don't know whether or not they are permitted in Islam. So a non-act of worship, we don't know. Is this allowed in Islam or is it not allowed in Islam? Is it permissible or not permissible? It is permissible. Why?
Until they are proven impermissible.
Until they are proven that it is not permissible in Islam.